Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. The longest season in F1 history is over. The Constructors' Championship is settled. Lando Norris with a mega drive to save McLaren after a dramatic and controversial Turn 1 incident again, this time involving Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. But Lewis Hamilton, a mega drive through the field, 18th yesterday, 4th today. Lots of reaction from Mercedes and from Hamilton to his future at Ferrari next year. Loads happened today. Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, the Grand Prix gets underway, the run down to Turn 1. This, I think, is Yuki Tsunoda somewhere, falling back through the pack after basically stalling off the line, which was very unfortunate. It also happened to Isaac Hadjar earlier in the day as well. His car wouldn't get going while he was trying to battle for the Formula 2 title, which was an absolute shambles. That's why Formula 2, yes, Bortoleto won the World Championship. That's a big deal for his prospects at Sauber going forwards. But the car stalling and stuff, the issues with the cars over there, is just a nightmare if you want to take Formula 2 as a serious championship. But Lando leads into Turn 1. Verstappen gets a big start off the line ahead of Charles Leclerc, and he decides he's got just enough momentum and grip to send it down the inside of Oscar Piastri. Now, this is a very controversial incident that we're going to talk about right about now. This is the contact between Verstappen and Piastri. They both go spinning around at the first corner. Lando's away and gone as he basically remains for the rest of the Grand Prix at this point. And Verstappen and Piastri spin around and they both fall back down the field. This is a classic case of Verstappen's front right hitting Piastri's rear left, and they both do a pirouette. Now, Max got a 10-second penalty for this. This was interesting to me, and I think probably fair, but nonetheless very controversial when it comes down to the history of Formula 1. It has been a known thing that F1 will tend to treat, and the stewards, lap 1 incidents differently to other incidents. And I understand why that is the case. This incident, though, is interesting. So this is a screenshot from the moment. Max sends it right down the inside. He had good momentum. Now, he doesn't have the corner here, really. I mean, we're at the apex of the corner. He's not ahead. Piastri isn't entitled to leave him any room. And to be fair, if Piastri runs any wider on the exit here, Piastri will be off the track himself. So there's nothing really Oscar can do. Now, this is one of those incidents that happens when a driver gets, look, Max got very optimistic here. Was it malicious? I mean, it's funny because it was totally unnecessary. I think that's the crux of the matter. Like, Max didn't need to do this for any World Championship reason. Of course, he wanted to win the race, and he had a good start, so he thought, right, if I can get second now, gives me a chance. But he did obviously make McLaren's life far more stressful today because this was not needed, of course, from Max, and it left Lando basically having to do the job himself. But of course, when you get into this position on the curb in such a tight line, you're going to understeer on the exit, which is what Max does. He understeers into the side of Piastri. Both of them go round and he gets a 10-second penalty. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons, right? Obviously, Max says, I was super unlucky all the way out the inside before the crash. I mean, was he all the way up the inside? You can debate that. Max isn't going to say, well, you can tell by Max's response here that he's like, yeah, my bad. And after the race, he did go to Piastri and apologise. Piastri said that in the post-race interviews. So I think Max knows, yeah, that was my fault. Shouldn't have done that. And look, it is what it is. But I think it's good, personally, that the stewards are actually punishing these things because kind of for years, it's, it's lap 1, turn 1, so it's a collision, it doesn't matter. Like, if someone's made a move like Max, far too optimistic up the inside, Piastri can't do anything differently there. Max certainly could have done. Causes a collision which ruins Piastri's race. Of course, the outcome shouldn't really matter, but you know what I'm saying. I do think those incidents should be punished regardless, and it seems the stewards are taking a hardline approach, Lap 1, turn 1, it's going to be a 10-second penalty. Lawson's tyre doesn't get screwed on correctly, it's going to be a 10-second stop and go. They did another one today after what we saw in Qatar. Let's say Piastri goes into the back of Colapinto, 10-second penalty. Bottas goes into the side of Magnussen, big penalties getting slapped. I think it's good. Obviously, we don't want to discourage good racing, right? And I think that's the concern that, if Max is getting a 10-second for this, will drivers try risky things into turn 1, knowing that the outcome is severe? I think they still will because they'll be confident they can get away with it and make the move stick. So I think this is personally a good stretch from the FIA. The drivers probably want harsher penalties as well because they don't want incidents like this ruining their race and drivers being incentivized to go for it because they don't think they're going to get penalized if they do do go for it. I think Max is probably realising that, yeah, penalty was probably justified in this case, but maybe in previous races we wouldn't have seen, and in previous years wouldn't have seen that type of thing punished lap 1, turn 1. But I think we are going to now, and it seems like that's the way the stewards are moving. I think it's a positive for the sport overall, although who knows, the FIA might change their mind, and at the start of next season, people are getting away with murder again. Piastri's radios, by the way, continue to deliver some excitement. He says, yeah, move him a world champion, that one. It's pretty rare that you see Piastri be so frustrated. Of course, he was in a good position today to massively capitalise, and it made Lando Norris's job far more challenging. Max also got, by the way, 2 penalty points for this, which now brings him up to 8 in the 12-month period. So, I mean, I don't know, a few more penalties from Max, and a race ban is on the cards for next year, maybe just in time for his child to be born. I don't know, maybe Max is planning to paternity leave, but of course he's going to want to win next year's championship. Funny thing was, of course, Piastri later in the same lap, after recovering, slams into the back of Colapinto. I don't know if that contributed to Colapinto's power unit issue later in the race, but it did give him a puncture. So, yeah, I think Piastri, he had a rough race today. Now, obviously, the start wasn't good, but when he was put on the back foot and McLaren still needed him to come through and score some points, he eventually got, 1 point at the end of the race, but obviously not what they were looking for him to deliver. And he did make a bit of a mess of this race, actually, after that point. Obviously, it was a challenge, but he didn't do himself any particular favours today, Piastri. Bottas, after a sensational Saturday, had a stinker today. He spins around Perez. It's not like Perez had a good start anyway, but unfortunately at this point, Perez was out of the Grand Prix. So, another just disaster for Perez. I mean, he turns up lap 1 on what may well be his final ever race as a Formula 1 driver, and it lasts about 25 seconds. It's, yeah, rough for Checo. He's done for the day after half a lap, basically, and he was out of the Grand Prix immediately. So, Perez was out of there. He did actually mention after the race this, which I thought was potentially quite telling, because we've seen in recent weeks, when Perez has been asked, are you staying in the drive next year? He says, don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, I'm in the drive. I've got a contract. Today, he gave a different response, given that every rumour under the sun is now telling us that Lawson is getting his seat next year, because Perez instead says, like I said, we're going to be talking in the coming days, and we will discuss the situation from both parties and see if we are able to reach an agreement. So that quite clearly says Perez is not 100% sure that he's keeping that seat, and he shouldn't be, obviously. If not, like I said, I've got a contract for next year. Now, that heavily implies to me, Perez basically knows that the seat won't be his more than likely, or at least that's a possibility, but he is absolutely not going to, retire and allow Red Bull to get rid of him for free. As he said, I will basically not be declining the seat. So if you want to get rid of it, you've got to pay me off. And fair play, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. So the race continues. Gasly into 3rd, Russell into 4th, Hülkenberg 5th, Magnussen had a mega start, and Charles Leclerc. It was actually a bonkers start to the Grand Prix. Piastri then got a 10-second penalty as well, but just have a look at this on the left-hand side. I mean, Leclerc at this point was in his 7th place. I guess we'll just go back to this screenshot, because this was lap 4 after the drama had unfolded. Perez is gone. Colapinto, Piastri are at the back of the field. Snyder, of course, who stalled on the line down in 16th here. Gasly was in 3rd, Verstappen was down in 10th, Hamilton had made big progress up to 12th on the first lap, and Leclerc made just an unbelievable, late braking round the outside of the chicane and overtook 5 cars in a single corner. Into an 8th place. Of course, Leclerc was trying his absolute best today to get something over the line here for Ferrari, because at this point, it was all on Lando. The gap in the constructors was 21 points. If Lando just wins, even if Ferrari were 2-3, that was going to be enough. But if Lando didn't win, then of course it become all to play for, and Piastri was out of position to do any real damage. Bottas got a penalty for this as well. So again, it was lap 1 incidents in the past, we've seen them go unpunished or lightly penalised. We're not seeing that anymore. I don't think it's going to prevent the drivers trying to make an overtake on lap 1, because that's often your best chance of doing it. But I think we are going to see risky, unfair moves punished more often now, and I think that's probably a good thing. Piastri then gets a 10-second penalty as well, so All of these penalties were flying through, and Hamilton started to make progress on the hard tyres. I think Mercedes chose a good strategy today here. The hard to the medium, go long with Hamilton. I think it was probably a sensible option, and it also gave them the chance to put the mediums on Hamilton at the ends and give him one final, it's hammer time on the radio, which I don't know if that was their thought process, but I feel like it might have been in part, and well, that is exactly what we got. So Hamilton was making some slow and steady progress. Cars ahead started to box. This, of course, was Gasly getting past Doohan, because Doohan, look, it's his first race weekends. He's going to be with that team next year. I just fear that he's quite slow. Like, he doesn't strike me as, like, Colapinto or like even a Verstappen back in the day. That's probably not a fair comparison between Colapinto and Max, but you know what I'm saying. There are drivers, Antonelli maybe is a better example, potentially next year for Mercedes. We've seen it in Monza with Antonelli. Got the pace, right? Got the pace, just a bit too, ambitious, crash happy, ambition over indecision, whatever you want to say. We saw it with Max, we've seen it with other drivers who have the pace, but yet they've got to reel it in, I suppose. There are some drivers who, like Zhou, who's not got good pace, but also is just kind of like a safe driver that doesn't really crash. Doohan strikes me as that kind of driver, which concerns me somewhat, I think, for his potential future. But anyway, he lets Gasly past. Gasly was in a good position again to score mega points for Alpine, and what a turnaround they managed to have towards the end of the season. But Sainz was getting semi-close to Norris at the end of the first stint, but it just seemed like Lando had a bit more pace in hands. We then saw Leclerc pulling some pretty impressive moves, actually. He ended up getting past Lawson, gets past Gasly, and makes good progress very quickly, Leclerc, high up the field. Sainz then comes into the box with an intended undercut attempt over Norris, but it was about 3.5 seconds behind, but it nearly worked. Sainz nailed the outlap. He ends up only about 1.5 seconds behind Norris out of the pits, but Norris maintains the lead. And that was pretty much all she wrote at that particular moment in terms of the way the Grand Prix was looking at that point. Unfortunately for Colapinto, his race then shortly afterwards, power unit issue. We may see him in Formula 1 next year. The only viable seat there now, it seems, is potentially Doohan's seat at Alpine. If they thought Doohan was just terrible this weekend, they might put Colapinto in the car instead. I don't think they will. That will cost them serious money to get him away from Williams. He will stay in the Williams family when Sainz leaves, when Albon leaves. Colapinto probably gets that drive again in a couple of years. That's my prediction. But his start of his Williams campaign certainly was better than the end of it. Max had to serve his 10-second penalty. Max as well came on the radio to say this: could we ask for 20 seconds instead, stupid idiots? Now, I don't think this is a massive deal, right? Obviously, they're going to broadcast it on the radio, which I think is always funny. And Max might be, the FIA stewards might be getting a nice little steak dinner this evening on a fine here. He didn't swear, so maybe that's okay. But definitely these words, calling the stewards stupid. And look, I mean, did they do anything outrageous, the stewards today, really? Look, the severity was severe, of course, but nonetheless, I think a lot of the penalties were justifiable, right? So I know that Brundle had a go at Max for this over the radio. Hamilton, though, was in third at this point, but of course he was yet to box. And there was, at this moment, a brief incident between Bottas and Magnussen. I feel bad for especially Magnussen here, just because he was having such a good final race for Haas, potentially final race in Formula 1. And then Bottas just comes steaming and goes bowling up the inside into the chicane here. I mean, it was a big impact, actually, between these two guys. Bottas's race was over, the front suspension was broken, and after such a good sally, that was not the way that he wanted it to end. And at that point, I thought there was going to be a brief safety car. It was possible there was going to be a safety car. If that had happened, Hamilton would have been out of pit, and that would have been all kinds of drama, right? Because then it would have been Norris with two Ferraris basically right behind him on a restart on the safety car. Hamilton would have had an advantage pitting under the safety car and putting the mediums on. He'd have been right in contention, Hamilton, had a safety car happen there to maybe even win the whole Grand Prix. I feel like beating Norris was always too difficult, but Hamilton definitely had the pace today to challenge the Ferraris. So Bono comes on the radio: Lewis, it's hammer time, right? Like for one final time in the sport. And fair play to Mercedes, because they and Hamilton executed pretty flawlessly today. As to be fair, did McLaren when Lando had to box. They were trying to stop the undercut from Sainz, and Lando comes in, they nail a 2.0 flat mega stop. So, McLaren clutched up when it mattered as well, but Hamilton was closing in on Russell, and it was honestly crazy, right? Because we saw the issue on the last lap. The RB comes over, there was yellow flags in Sector 2, and therefore DRS was disabled because of that down the long back straight, which gave, that seemed to be Hamilton's best chance, because he was about 6/10 behind Russell going into that straight on the final lap of the Grand Prix. Had he had DRS there, he'd have been, 2/10 back into the chicane, and surely would have made the move happen into Turn 9. But he makes the move happen anyway around the outside of Turn 9. I thought this is kind of incredible, right? After a safety car screwed up his chances when he was level on points with Max back in 2021. He was level on points this weekend, Hamilton, with Russell, all-time as Mercedes teammates, and he wasn't going to let a late, race Abu Dhabi kind of yellow flag related incident stop him this time around. So Hamilton goes all the way around the outside of Russell. It was good, clean, fair racing between the two of them, and therefore Hamilton beats Russell all-time as teammate, which was quite an incredible way to finish his career with Mercedes. But I did think a pretty big statement today from Lando Norris, because he had a lot of pressure on him today. Piastri was out of contention. The Ferraris were, coming quickly. Leclerc had a phenomenal drive from where he started to where he eventually finished on the podium. I mean, what a performance Leclerc put in today to make that happen. Sainz was fighting hard as well. And, Lando, if he made mistakes as in Singapore or other times we've seen this season, that could have been it for McLaren. It could have been over, right? The championship might have gone to Ferrari, but no. They win the Constructors' Championship. Lando takes the title of the final race winner of the season and makes a pretty big statement, I think, towards next year as well. Yes, Norris didn't have mega pressure from another driver on track today, but he still had to deal with the pressure of the situation, and he coped very well indeed. I think Norris, I don't want to say he's fully turned a corner yet in terms of where he is as a driver, but the more races he wins, the more confident I get that he can become a driver that is actually capable of beating Max or whoever other contender in a championship fight. We know that he's got the pace. It's the full package that Norris has been lacking. And I think every race that he wins, he gets closer and closer to becoming that full package. I still think that in terms of the first new World Drivers' Champion, I'm expecting it to be Leclerc. Hamilton could win it next year. Max could win it next year. I'm sure that's a topic, though, for the off-season, who actually is the favourite going into next season. But McLaren, they do close out to win the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari tried their hardest. They really did. But, McLaren win it for the first time in, 26, 28 years, something crazy like that. I think the longest ever gap that we've actually seen. And Norris said on the radio, next year is going to be my year as well. So we'll see if he can back up those words when next season starts. Just for you Norris McLaren fans out there, I just wanted to mention this quickly. The last 6 times a driver has won Abu Dhabi, they've won the championship the next year. And, Lando won it this year. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say for now. But the conclusion for Hamilton at Mercedes was actually very good. Of course, he just missed the podium in the end, but still coming from where he did on the grid yesterday after all the drama, I thought it was just a great way for Hamilton to end his Mercedes career. Okay, not a podium, but coming from where he did on the grid, driving in, that was a vintage Hamilton performance, right? Coming through the field as he did, going along on the hard tyres, having great pace, switching to the mediums and being basically the fastest man on track to close out the Grand Prix. Toto says that was a driver, a world champion. And I thought some very nice words here from Hamilton towards the team. The pleasure's been mine. Dreamed alone. Together we believe what we've achieved. The courage, the determination, the passion for seeing me, supporting me when he came. Obviously, because it's not just Mercedes here. We're talking about the fact that Hamilton has been backed by Mercedes since his very early junior days, coming through into McLaren. Because even when he was at McLaren, he was still, driving with Mercedes power. He was still connected to Mercedes in some way. So, it's it's not just his 12 seasons with Mercedes, it's more than that. And that's what he's, seeing me, supporting me when I started out as a leap of faith, turned into a journey into the history books. All the best to everyone. And it was just nice to see this moment. Even Toto, given some of the drama of the weekend with Hamilton's send-off, I think Mercedes and Hamilton and Russell kind of nailed it today. I said to Hamilton, if we can't win, as in if Mercedes can't win next year, if their car isn't good enough, we will cheer for you to win instead. So quite the weekend. I think a very fitting way to end a crazy Formula 1 season. Max is your world champion, McLaren are your constructors champions, but I feel like we're kind of only just getting started, really. Next season, if this season has been anything to go by, it should be an absolute banger. And thanks for all the support this year on the videos. Obviously, it kind of feels weird to say that, but because I'm not going anywhere, right? I'll be back back tomorrow again, probably, to talk more Formula 1 drama. But look, we've got lots to talk about in the off-season. Thanks for what's been the best season on this channel by a country mile. And yeah, we're not going anywhere, baby. Next year, hopefully, is going to be even bigger and better than this one was in basically every respect when it comes down to Formula 1. So thanks for watching as always. Take care of yourselves. Subscribe if you're new, all that good stuff. And I will be seeing you next time.